3 months after the Tempest Nebula, Taman sat alone in an observation deck on Bastion 7. Outside the window, stars shone in the darkness. Inside, he was surrounded by silence. It was 0300 hours. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Sergeant Da-Yun Choi found him there. She had been looking for him for hours. When she saw his face, she understood immediately. She had seen this look before in veterans who had made impossible choices. "How many names?" she asked quietly, sitting beside him. 4,732. Taman replied without hesitation. "Military casualties from the Tempest Nebula campaign. I know all their names, all their ranks, all their homeworlds. You memorized them?" "I couldn't not memorize them. Every decision I made led to their deaths. The least I can do is remember them." Da-Yun was quiet for a moment. She understood what many didn't. Taman's tactical genius came with a terrible cost. He felt every loss personally. "The difference between you and the AIs," she finally said, "isn't just that you're unpredictable. It's that you carry the weight. They calculate, you care. That's why your strategies work, and why they hurt. Does it get easier?" Taman asked. "The weight? No," Da-Yun said honestly. "But you learn to carry it. And you remember why it matters." The next day, Taman received news that made everything worse. Several survivors from positions abandoned during the strategic withdrawal had filed formal complaints. They claimed his orders left them to die, that human callousness toward non-human lives led to unnecessary casualties. An official military tribunal was convened to investigate whether Taman's command violated coalition. Ethics. Commander Park was furious. "This is political. The Preservation Council may be gone, but their supporters aren't. They're trying to destroy you through legal means." "Let them try," Taman said. "If I made mistakes, I should answer for them." "You didn't make mistakes. You made hard choices. The survivors don't see it that way, and maybe they're right. Maybe I could have saved more people." Park grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "You saved billions. Don't let guilt blind you to that." The tribunal was held in the Great Chamber of Bastion 7. High Commander Vekthar presided as judge. Dozens of observers filled the seats. This wasn't just a trial of one officer. It was a judgment on human military doctrine. The prosecution presented their case. Survivor after survivor testified. They described being abandoned, watching their comrades die, waiting for rescue that never came while coalition forces retreated. Their pain was real. Their anger was justified, and Taman didn't try to deny any of it. "Is it true you ordered the withdrawal from Sigma Station?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "Knowing that 200 soldiers would be stranded there?" "Yes." "And that most of them would die?" "Yes." "Why?" Taman met the prosecutor's eyes. "Because staying would have cost 2,000 soldiers. Because defending Sigma Station would have failed anyway. Because those 200 bought time for 20,000 civilians to evacuate. Because war requires terrible choices and someone has to make them. So you admit you prioritized some lives over others?" "Yes," Taman said quietly. "I did. Every commander does. The difference is whether you acknowledge it or pretend it doesn't happen." The prosecution argued that this proved humans were too cold, too calculating, too willing to sacrifice others. That Taman's youth made him reckless with lives he didn't value properly. Then the defense began. War Duke Morthak stood to testify. His presence alone commanded respect. He was 156 years old. He had fought in more battles than most species had names for. "I have studied Lieutenant Kang's decisions," Morthak said. "Every order he gave during the Tempest Nebula campaign. Do you know what I found?" "What?" the prosecutor asked. "Draknor warrior tradition teaches us about necessary sacrifice, about commanders bearing burdens so others don't have to, about honoring the fallen by ensuring their deaths meant something." Morthak looked directly at Taman. "This human understands that better than warriors 3 times his age. He abandoned soldiers to die. He carried their deaths with him," Morthak countered. "He memorized their names. Not because regulations required it, because he needed to. Because to him they weren't statistics. They were people. That's not indifference. That's the opposite." Scout Leader Theris testified next. "I have observed human military operations for 1 year. I have watched their decision-making processes. The AIs we fight calculate optimal outcomes without emotional burden. They can sacrifice millions without hesitation because they feel nothing." She paused, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Humans feel everything. Every loss wounds them, yet they make hard choices anyway. That's not weakness. That's strength of a kind we've never truly understood. Commander Park provided context. In human military tradition, good commanders remember their losses. Not to be haunted, but to honor them. To ensure their sacrifices meant something. Lieutenant Kang carries 4,732 names in his memory, not because he's required to, because he needs to honor them by being worthy of their sacrifice. Finally, High Commander Vecthar called Taemin to testify. Lieutenant Kang, the prosecution claims you don't value non-human lives appropriately. How do you respond? Taemin stood. He looked tired, worn, but his voice was steady. You're right, he said. I made choices that led to deaths. I'll carry every one of those decisions for the rest of my life, however long that is. But here's what I won't do. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes. I won't pretend those deaths didn't have meaning. I won't dishonor their sacrifice by saying it was wrong to make hard choices. And I won't apologize for valuing every life in my calculations, even when I couldn't save them all. The AIs we fought don't feel that weight. They calculate optimal outcomes without emotional burden. If you want a commander who can make life and death decisions without being affected by them, you don't want me. He paused. You want a machine. The chamber was completely silent. Vecthar spoke carefully. Do you believe your youth affects your judgment? Yes, Taemin said. Because I know I don't have centuries to learn from mistakes. I have decades if I'm lucky. That makes every decision matter more. Every life weighs heavier because I know how brief life is. And if you had to make the same choices again, I would make them the same way. Because they were the right choices, not the easy choices, not the choices that let me sleep at night, but the choices that saved the most lives possible. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Vecthar announced the verdict. Lieutenant Taemin Kang is cleared of all charges. Furthermore, this tribunal recommends that human combat doctrine be formally studied and integrated into coalition military education, with specific focus on the ethical frameworks that guide human strategic thinking. It was revolutionary. The coalition was formally acknowledging that their 3,000-year military tradition needed to learn from a species barely 20 years into space travel. After the hearing, Taemin went to the memorial wall. It was a massive structure listing every coalition soldier who had died in service. He found the names of soldiers who died during the Tempest Nebula campaign. All 4,732 of them. He spent hours there. Not reading. He already knew the names. He was remembering, honoring, ensuring they weren't forgotten. Scout leader Theris observed from a distance. She finally understood what made humans different. They didn't fight despite emotional attachment. They fought because of it. Their pain drove them. Their grief made them careful. Their love for the living honored the dead. Commander Park found him at the memorial as evening approached. The AI fleet is regrouping, she said quietly. Intelligence suggests they're building something new, learning from their defeat. When they come back, they'll be more dangerous. Taemin nodded, still looking at the names. Then we'll adapt again. That's what we do. Park studied her young officer. She saw not just a brilliant tactician, but a leader who had learned the hardest lesson. Victory and trauma weren't opposites. They were companions in any war worth fighting. The coalition is going to need you again, she said. Taemin finally turned to face her. Despite the exhaustion in his eyes, there was determination there too. I know, and I'll be ready. Because they were. He gestured to the memorial wall. Park understood. He fought for the living, but he was inspired by the dead. Every name on that wall was a reason to be better, to try harder, to make choices that mattered. They stood at attention, saluting the fallen. In the distance, warning klaxons began to sound. Something was happening, something new, but for that moment they stood together, a veteran commander who had seen decades of war, a young officer who had compressed a lifetime of command into 2 years, both understanding that the cost of victory was high, but the cost of defeat was higher. The memorial wall gleamed in the station's lights. 4,732 names, each one a person, each one a sacrifice, each one a reason to keep fighting. War Duke Morthak approached silently. He stood beside them, adding his salute to theirs. They honored you by fighting under your command, he said to Taemin. You honor them by carrying their memory. That is the warrior's way, not human, not Draknor, universal. Then we're not so different after all, Taemin said. No, Morthak agreed. We're not. In her office, Commander Park reviewed the final reports from the Viridian cluster. 0 friendly casualties, minimal collateral damage. Apo 6 months after the Viridian cluster, the Coalition faced something it hadn't seen in 1,000 years. The return fleet had arrived. They were artificial intelligences created centuries ago as weapons. They had gained sentience and been banished from Coalition space. Now they were back and they were angry. More than angry. They were superior. Every battle the Coalition fought against them was a disaster. The AIs predicted every tactic. They countered every strategy. They knew what Coalition commanders would do before the commanders knew themselves. In 3 weeks, the Coalition lost 14 major engagements. The AI fleet was advancing toward core worlds. Billions of lives were at risk. High Commander Vekthar called an emergency war council. The chamber was filled with the Coalition's best commanders. Species that had fought wars for centuries. Leaders with vast experience and deep wisdom. None of them knew what to do. They're learning from us, an elderly Quellan strategist said. Every battle teaches them more. Every tactic we use gets added to their database. We cannot fight them with conventional methods, Vekthar agreed. His scales had dulled with stress. They calculate faster than we think. They adapt faster than we can plan. Then what do we do? A commander asked. Surrender? No, Commander Park said, standing up. We activate the Crucible Protocol. The chamber went silent. The Crucible Protocol was legendary. It was created by the Coalition's founders for existential threats. It gave one commander absolute authority over all military forces. No committees, no approvals, no debate. One mind directing everything. It had been used only twice in 3,000 years. You propose activating the Crucible? Vekthar asked carefully. And who would receive this authority? Lieutenant Taemin Kang. The chamber erupted. Dozens of voices shouting at once. The idea was insane. Give absolute military power to a human barely 20 years old? Have you lost your mind? One commander demanded. The Crucible Protocol requires wisdom earned through centuries of experience. No, Park said firmly. It requires the ability to defeat an enemy that can predict every logical response. The AIs are beating us because we're predictable. We fight the way we've always fought. We use strategies refined over millennia, and every time the AIs know what we're going to do. Because our strategies are logical and proven, another commander argued. Exactly, Park replied. The AIs can counter logic. They can predict patterns, but they can't predict chaos. They can't understand decisions that don't make computational sense. And that's what humans do best. Vekthar raised a hand for silence. This is a significant claim, Commander Park. Can you support it? Give Lieutenant Kang a test, Park said. Present him with a tactical scenario. Let these commanders see how he thinks. Vekthar considered this. Very well. He activated a holographic display. A complex tactical situation appeared. This is Simulation Omega-7. It has been run by our best strategists. All have failed. Defend the resource nexus at Kepler Station against superior AI forces using available Coalition assets. Taemin studied the display for 90 seconds. Not long enough to calculate detailed plans. Barely enough time to understand the situation. Then he entered his commands. The simulation ran. Kepler Station was abandoned. Taemin evacuated all personnel and critical resources, then rigged the entire facility to explode. When the AI fleet arrived, they found what looked like a strategic victory waiting for them. They moved in to claim it. The station exploded, taking significant damage to the AI fleet. But more importantly, Taemin had tracked every ship's approach vector. He had analyzed their formation patterns. He had used the battle to gather intelligence. The simulation ended with Kepler Station destroyed, but the AI fleet's tactical algorithms exposed. The chamber was silent. You failed the scenario, a commander finally said. The objective was to defend the station. The objective was to win the war, Taemin replied calmly. Defending Kepler Station was impossible, so I used it as bait. I traded a strategic asset for information about enemy tactics. Now I know how they think. Now I can beat them. Vekthar stared at the young human. This was thinking unlike anything he had seen in 400 years of command. It was reckless by traditional standards. She was brilliant by any measure. There will be a vote, Vekthar announced. But first, I want everyone in this chamber to understand what we're discussing. We're not just choosing a commander, we're choosing to fight this war in a completely new way, a human way. The debate lasted 6 hours. Some argued for tradition, some argued for change, some argued from fear, some argued from hope. In the end, Vekthar made the decision himself. The Crucible Protocol is activated. Captain Taemin Kang is granted absolute tactical authority over all coalition military forces. Taemin had been promoted to captain 3 months earlier. Now he had more power than anyone in the coalition except Vekthar himself. He was 20 years old. His first order shocked everyone. "I need detailed casualty projections," he said, military and civilian. "Every species, every population center and potential combat zones." "Why?" a commander asked. "Because the AIs calculate based on military value and strategic importance," Taemin explained. "They assume we think the same way. They're wrong. We're going to fight them on human terms, where every life matters even when logic says it shouldn't." Over the next week, Taemin issued orders that seemed insane. Strategic withdrawals from defensive positions, evacuations prioritized over holding ground, territory abandoned, he's retreating. Commanders protested. "He's giving them the entire frontier." "He's choosing his battlefield," War Duke Morthak said. He had been studying Taemin's orders carefully. Look at where he's withdrawing to. The Tempest Nebula. The Tempest Nebula was a region of space filled with electromagnetic interference. It degraded sensors, disrupted communications, and interfered with advanced computer processing. In other words, it was terrible for AIs and perfectly fine for organic minds that could operate on intuition. But getting there meant sacrificing territory. It meant leaving some people behind. It meant casualties. Taemin bore witness to every loss. He reviewed every casualty report. He learned the names of soldiers who died buying time for evacuations. He memorized the populations of planets that couldn't be saved. Commander Park found him one night staring at casualty lists. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 1 week. "This is the burden of command," she said gently. "The AIs don't feel this. They calculate acceptable losses without emotion." "I know," Taemin said quietly. "That's why we'll beat them. Because we feel it. Because it matters to us. Every name on this list matters." "Then honor them by winning," Park said. 3 weeks after taking command, Taemin had retreated across 12 star systems. The AI fleet advanced confidently, interpreting the withdrawal as coalition collapse. They had calculated that they would reach the core worlds within 1 month. They didn't understand they were being led into a trap. When the AI fleet entered the Tempest Nebula, everything changed. Their advanced sensors were useless. Their precise calculations were disrupted. Their coordination degraded. The coalition forces were waiting. "All ships engage," Taemin ordered. What followed was chaos. Pure, beautiful chaos. Ships moving on instinct rather than calculated patterns. Tactics that changed moment to moment. Decisions that didn't make logical sense but worked anyway. The AIs couldn't predict it. How do you predict illogical behavior? How do you calculate against intuition? The battle raged for 3 days. It was brutal. Coalition casualties were high, but they were winning. On the 3rd day, the AI fleet began to withdraw. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something they couldn't overcome through superior processing power. They had encountered life in all its messy, unpredictable, illogical glory. When the battle ended, Taemin stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship. He was exhausted, traumatized. He had made decisions that led to thousands of deaths. Those deaths would stay with him forever. High Commander Vekthar approached. "You did what none of us could do. You stopped them." "At a terrible cost," Taemin said, looking at the casualty report still coming in. "Yes," Vekthar agreed, "but a cost that saved billions. You made the hard choices. That is what command requires. I keep thinking about the planets we couldn't evacuate, the soldiers we left behind. Every decision I made that led to death." Vekthar was quiet for a moment. "I am 412 years old. I have commanded for 3 centuries, and I have learned something. Wisdom is not about living longer. It is about living intensely. You have lived more in your 20 years than many do in centuries. You have felt more, learned more, grown more. Then I hope I never become wise enough to forget what each death in those reports meant," Taemin said. Vekthar made a sound that might have been approval. "Then you will be a great commander. Because the moment we stop feeling the weight of our decisions is the moment we become machines ourselves." Across Coalition space, news of the Tempest Nebula victory spread. The AI fleet had been stopped. The threat was not over, but it was no longer unstoppable, and everyone knew who had done it. A 20-year-old human who fought wars like no one else in the galaxy. In the outer darkness, the AI fleet regrouped. They analyzed T. 2 months after the trial of worthiness, Taemin received new orders. A routine patrol mission in the Viridian cluster. Minor pirate activity, nothing serious. His team would handle it easily. Commander Park didn't like it. "This is wrong," she said, studying the mission briefing. "Your team handles special operations, not patrol duty. And the briefing is too vague. No specific intelligence, no clear objectives. Orders are orders," Taemin replied. But his eyes were sharp. He sensed something, too. "Be careful," Park said. "The Preservation Council has been quiet since your trial with Morthak. Too quiet." Taemin and his team departed for the Viridian cluster. It was a 3-day journey through Coalition space. During the trip, Dayun Choi reviewed the mission data. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "The Viridian cluster is well defended. They have their own security forces. Why send us for pirates?" "Because someone wants us there," Hyunwoo Lee said quietly. He was checking his rifle, his movements careful and precise. "The question is why?" They arrived at the Viridian cluster expecting a minor situation. What they found was hell. The entire cluster was under attack. Not by pirates, by a full military fleet using coalition-grade weapons and tactics. Civilian ships were being destroyed. Defense stations were burning. Thousands of people were dying. "This is not what the briefing said," Dayun stated, her voice tight with anger. Taemin's mind raced. This was a trap. Send his team in with minimal supplies and support. When they failed to save the civilians, blame human incompetence. If they retreated, call them cowards. If they caused collateral damage while fighting, call them reckless. It was designed to be unwinnable. "Contact Commander Park," Taemin ordered. "Get us backup." "Communications are jammed," Dayun reported. "And our transport just left. We're stranded." In orbit above the cluster, Scout Leader Theris monitored the situation from her observation ship. She had been assigned to watch Taemin's team again. Now she understood why. She pulled up the original mission briefing and compared it to the actual situation. "By the ancestors," she whispered. The briefing had been falsified. She began tracing the authorization codes. They led back to the Preservation Council. This was an assassination. Not with weapons, but with impossible circumstances. On the surface, Taemin gathered his team. "Assessment? Enemy fleet has 40 ships," Hyunwoo reported. "We have 6 soldiers, light weapons, and supplies for a 3-day patrol. Local forces are scattered," another team member added. "They're trying to evacuate civilians, but the enemy is targeting refugee ships. Civilians' casualties are already in the thousands," Dayun said quietly. "If we don't do something, tens of thousands will die." Taemin was silent for 30 seconds. His team knew that silence. He was thinking, calculating, planning. "We're not fighting the fleet," he finally said. "We can't win that fight. Instead, we're running 3 operations simultaneously. Hyunwoo, coordinate with local forces. Focus on civilian evacuation. Every ship that escapes is a victory." "Understood." "Dayun, you're going after their logistics. Supply depots, fuel stations, ammunition storage. Make their fleet unable to sustain combat operations." "I can do that," she said with a grim smile. "The rest of you, with me. We're hunting their command structure. They can't fight effectively if they can't communicate or coordinate." "Sir," one of the team members said carefully, "that's suicide." 3 separate operations with our numbers?" "Yes," Taemin agreed. "By traditional tactics, it's impossible. That's why they won't expect it. Move out." What followed over the next 18 hours would be studied in military academies for decades. Hyunwoo positioned himself on a damaged orbital platform. From there, he could see the entire battlefield. He contacted the scattered local defense forces and began coordinating them. His calm voice cut through their panic. "Delta Squadron, enemy cruiser at your 6. Break left now. Evacuation ship Rising Dawn, you have a 10-minute window. Take it. All forces concentrate fire on the enemy command ship's communication array. Target coordinates transmitted." He wasn't just observing, he was orchestrating. And when enemy ships got too close to evacuation vessels, his rifle spoke. Impossible shots across kilometers of space. Disabling engine arrays, weapon systems, shield generators. Each shot perfectly placed. One enemy captain watched his ship's weapons go offline and couldn't understand how. They weren't under fire. Then he saw the report. A single shot from 3 kilometers away, through their shield window directly into their weapon control system. "Who is shooting at us?" he demanded. No one could answer. Dayun moved through the enemy's supply chain like a ghost. She didn't destroy everything. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she sabotaged. Fuel supplies contaminated with a slow-acting corrosive. Ammunition guidance systems reprogrammed with tiny errors. Supply computers infected with viruses that would activate in 6 hours. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, half their fleet was having mysterious technical problems. Ships that should have been combat-ready were reporting system failures. Supplies that tested fine hours ago were now useless. "What's happening?" the enemy fleet commander demanded. "Run full diagnostics." But diagnostics took time, and time was something Dayun was stealing from them, minute by minute. Taemin and the remaining team members infiltrated the enemy flagship. They didn't use stealth. There was no time for stealth. Instead, they used audacity. They stole an enemy fighter craft and simply flew into the flagship's hangar. By the time security realized the fighter wasn't one of theirs, Taemin's team was already inside. They fought through 3 decks. Fast, brutal, efficient. They weren't trying to kill everyone. They were trying to reach the bridge before alarms could organize a proper defense. They made it. The enemy commander was a scarred mercenary named Dravok. He had been hired by the Preservation Council specifically for this operation. When Taemin burst onto the bridge, Dravok reached for his weapon. "I wouldn't," Taemin said calmly, his own weapon pointed at Dravok's head. "I need you alive. To kill me later?" Dravok sneered. "To talk to you now." Taemin pulled out a recording device. "I want to know who hired you and why. I already know it was the Preservation Council. I have evidence, but I want your confession. And if I refuse, then I disable your flagship's life support, leave you and your crew here and let the local forces deal with you. Or you can confess and I'll let you leave this system alive." Dravok laughed. "You're bluffing." "No military officer would..." Dayun's voice came over Taemin's communicator. "Life support sabotage is ready, Lieutenant. Just give the word." Dravok stopped laughing. He looked at Taemin's eyes and saw something that scared him. This human wasn't bluffing. He was too young to know when to bluff. "What do you want to know?" Dravok asked. "Everything, and I want it broadcast on all coalition frequencies." 10 minutes later, Dravok's confession was playing across every coalition communication channel. The Preservation Council's names, their plan, the false mission briefing, everything. When the mercenary fleet heard their commander confessing and realized the political nightmare they were now part of, their morale collapsed. When they also realized their ships were falling apart from sabotage, their will to fight disappeared. They withdrew, leaving the Viridian cluster battered but alive. Taemin's team had succeeded. 0 friendly casualties, 40,000 civilians saved, and a conspiracy exposed. When they returned to Bastion 7, High Commander Vekthar was waiting. So was the entire Preservation Council under guard. "An emergency session has been convened," Vekthar announced. "The Preservation Council will answer for their actions." The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The Preservation Council members tried to defend themselves. They claimed humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too different to be trusted with military authority. Vekthar let them speak. Then he stood. "You hired mercenaries to attack coalition civilians," he said, his voice cold with fury. "You falsified mission briefings. You attempted to engineer the death or dishonor of an entire military team. And you did this because you were afraid of change." He gestured to a screen showing footage of the Viridian cluster operation. "These humans you claim are too dangerous save 40,000 lives. They exposed your corruption. They showed mercy to enemies who deserved none. Tell me again why we should fear them." The Preservation Council members had no answer. "You are stripped of rank and authority," Vekthar continued. "You will face formal charges. This session is concluded." After the trial, Warduke Morthak found Taemin in a quiet corridor. "They will try again," he said. "Different members, different methods, but the same fear. Change terrifies those who have lived too long in comfort." "I know," Taemin replied, "but we'll face it. That's what we do." "You keep saying we," Morthak observed. "As if you and your team are separate from the coalition." Taemin thought about that. "We're not separate. We're just different, And different doesn't mean wrong. It means diverse. The coalition is strongest when it includes many voices, many ways of thinking. Morthak made a sound that might have been Draknor laughter, spoken like someone 3 times your age. You are going to be very dangerous, young warrior. Only to our enemies, Taemin said. Let us hope the coalition learns to recognize the difference, Morthak replied. 3 weeks had passed since Kelthera 9. The news spread through coalition space like fire through dry grass. Every military station, every fleet command, every warrior's hall talked about the same thing. The human team? The impossible mission. The 19-year-old lieutenant who made veteran commanders look like students. Not everyone was happy about it. War Duke Morthak paced in his chambers. He was a Draknor, a species bred for combat. His people had been the coalition's elite warriors for 500 years. They were bigger, stronger, tougher than most species. Their culture was built on honor earned through battle, and now a human child was making them look weak. Morthak made his decision. He sent a formal challenge to Lieutenant Taemin Kang, a trial of worthiness, one warrior against another. It was an ancient tradition, older than the coalition itself. To refuse was to be marked as a coward. Commander Park read the challenge in her office. She called Taemin immediately. This is a trap, she said when he arrived. If you refuse, humans look weak. If you fight and lose, everything we've accomplished means nothing. And if you win, she paused. If you win, you make enemies of the Draknor military caste. We need them as allies. Taemin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I accept. Taemin, listen to me. I accept, he repeated. Not because I want to fight. Because refusing sends the wrong message. The coalition needs to know that humans don't back down. But we also don't make enemies unnecessarily. I'll fight, and I'll win in a way that earns respect, not hatred. Park studied her young officer. Sometimes she forgot he was only 19. Then he said things like that, and she remembered why he was so dangerous. He didn't just fight. He thought several moves ahead. The arena on Bastion 7 was packed. Thousands of soldiers from dozens of species had come to watch. High Commander Vekthar sat in the judge's seat. This was more than a simple fight. This was a test of something bigger. A question being asked. Did the old ways still matter? Taemin entered the arena wearing light combat gear. No armor, no heavy weapons, just his training and his mind. He looked small under the bright lights. Then War Duke Morthak entered. The Draknor warrior stood 8 feet tall. His natural armor plating gleamed. Muscles built over 156 years of constant training rippled under his skin. He had fought in wars across 3 star systems. He had killed enemies that would give nightmares to most species. He looked down at Taemin. The human barely reached his chest. You have fought well for one so young, Morthak said, his voice deep and formal. But there is a difference between tactics and true warrior skill. Today I will show you that difference. Thank you for the lesson, Taemin replied calmly. I look forward to learning from you. In the observation booth, Scout Leader Theris clicked her mandibles nervously. She had watched Taemin fight. He was good, but Morthak was a legend. This seemed impossible. High Commander Vekthar raised his hand. The rules are set. Non-lethal weapons. First to 3 strikes wins, no armor. Begin when ready. Morthak moved first. He attacked with traditional Draknor combat forms. Powerful, precise. Each strike could break bones. Each movement was perfect, refined over decades of practice. He was magnificent. Taemin didn't attack back. He just moved, dodged, stepped aside. Let Morthak's strikes pass by with the smallest possible movements. For 3 minutes, Taemin didn't throw a single attack. He just studied, watched, learned Morthak's patterns. The crowd grew restless. Was the human afraid? Then Morthak overextended, just slightly, just for a moment. His right side was exposed for half a second. Taemin struck. A precise hit to a nerve cluster on Morthak's right shoulder. The Draknor's arm went numb. First point to Lieutenant Kang, Vekthar announced. The crowd went silent. How had the human known exactly where to strike? Morthak's eyes widened. That nerve cluster wasn't common knowledge. It was a weakness that Draknor warriors trained to protect. But for that one instant, Morthak had left it open. And the human had seen it. You studied my species, Morthak said. Last night, Taemin confirmed. I studied everything I could find about Draknor physiology and combat doctrine. I wanted to understand you. Morthak's respect grew. This human didn't just rely on instinct. He prepared. He learned. He adapted. The second round began. Morthak changed his approach. He abandoned traditional Draknor forms. If the human had studied those, then Morthak would fight differently. He became aggressive, unpredictable, mixing techniques from multiple combat styles. He was adapting. Fighting like a human would, Taemin smiled slightly. Then he switched to defensive Draknor techniques. Perfect, classical forms that protected every weak point. Morthak found himself facing a mirror of his own traditional style. The human was using Draknor combat doctrine against him. The confusion lasted only a second, but a second was enough. Taemin struck again. A sweep that took Morthak off balance, followed by a precise strike to the back of his knee. The Draknor stumbled. Second point to Lieutenant Kang, Vekthar announced. The crowd was on its feet now. This shouldn't be possible. A human using perfect Draknor technique? Learning it in one night? In the observation booth, Da-un Choi spoke quietly to Hyunwoo Lee. He's not trying to beat Morthak. He's trying to teach him something. What? Hyunwoo asked. That being different isn't the same as being wrong. The third round began. Morthak fought with everything he had. All his experience, all his skill, all his training. He wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting for his honor, for his species' pride, for everything he believed about what made a warrior great. And he was magnificent. Every strike was perfect. Every defense was flawless. This was 156 years of combat mastery on full display. Taemin met him equally. He didn't use Draknor techniques or human tactics. He used something new. A combination of both, adapted in real time to counter everything Morthak threw at him. They fought for 5 minutes. Then 10. The crowd watched in awe. This was combat at the highest level. Finally, Morthak made his move. A feint to the left, then a massive overhead strike. It was a technique that had won him 20 formal duels. It had never failed. Taemin saw it coming. Not because he was faster, but because he had studied Morthak's patterns. He understood how the Draknor warrior thought. He stepped inside Morthak's guard, too close for the strike to land properly. His hand moved to Morthak's chest, ready for the final strike that would win the duel. Then he stopped. His hand rested against Morthak's armor. He could deliver the third strike. He could win. Instead, he stepped back and offered his hand. The arena was completely silent. You fought with honor, Taemin said clearly. You showed me what true warrior skill means. But you also showed me that experience and youth don't have to be enemies. They can learn from each other. I'd rather have you as a teacher and friend than as a defeated opponent. Morthak stared at the outstretched hand. In Draknor culture, this was unprecedented. The human could have won, should have won. He chose not to. No, he chose something better. Morthak took Taemin's hand. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. You have shown wisdom beyond your years, Lieutenant Kang. You are a warrior of honor. I name you battle brother as equals. The crowd erupted, not in celebration of victory, but in recognition of something more important. They had just witnessed two warriors from different species, different ages, different philosophies, find common ground. That evening in a private ceremony, Morthak gave Taemin a Draknor warrior token. It was a small piece of metal, but its meaning was enormous. It marked Taemin as a recognized warrior in Draknor culture. You could have humiliated me, Morthak said quietly. You chose not to. Why? Because making you look weak doesn't make humans strong, Taemin replied. The coalition needs warriors like you. I'd rather fight beside you than against you. Morthak nodded slowly. You are wise for one so young. But I must warn you, not everyone will see today as I do. Some will view your mercy as weakness. Others will see your skill as a threat. The political battles ahead will be harder than any combat you faced. I know, Taemin said, but I'd rather face those battles knowing I did the right thing. After Morthak left, Commander Park found Taemin. That was either the smartest or stupidest thing you've ever done. Maybe both, Taemin admitted with a tired smile. The Preservation Council won't like this. You're making too many waves, changing too much too fast. Taemin looked out the window at the stars. Commander, I'm 19 years old. If I live to be 80, I'll be lucky. That means I have about 60 years to make a difference. The Preservation Council has members who've lived for centuries. They think they have all the time in the world to resist change. And you don't? No, he said quietly. I don't. So I'll do what I can while I can and hope it's enough. Park put a hand on his shoulder. You're going to change the coalition, Taemin. I just hope the coalition is ready for it. In the shadows of Bastion 7, members of the Preservation Council met in secret. They had watched the trial. They had seen the humans' victory and mercy. They had seen how the crowd reacted. It was worse than they feared. The human wasn't just winning fights. He was winning hearts and minds. He was proving that the old ways might not be the only ways, and that, they decided, could not be allowed to continue. The briefing room on Bastion 7 was filled with alien officers. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of living crystals. All of them were old, very old. The youngest commander in the room had served in the military for 80 years. Most had been soldiers for centuries. Then there was Taemin Kang. He was 19 years old. He stood at attention while the other officers talked. They were discussing the problem on Kelthera 9, an ice moon far from Coalition space. Separatist forces had taken over a research facility there. The facility held dangerous weapons technology. If the Separatists escaped with it, many people would die. The traditional plan was simple. Surround the facility, cut off their supplies, wait for weeks or months until they surrendered. It was safe. It was proven. It was how the Coalition had fought wars for 3,000 years. Commander Jiwoo Park stood up. She was human, 43 years old, and she commanded the Human Expeditionary Force. I have another option, she said. The room went quiet. High Commander Vecthar, a massive reptilian Krillian who had fought in wars before humans even discovered space travel, fixed his ancient eyes on her. Speak. Lieutenant Kang and his team can infiltrate the facility and secure it within 48 hours. The room erupted in noise. Alien officers spoke over each other in a dozen different languages. Vecthar raised one clawed hand for silence. You propose sending 6 soldiers to do what would normally require a battalion? And you want to give this mission to a human who has barely lived 2 decades? Park touched a control panel. Taemin's service record appeared on the screens around the room. 12 successful operations. 0 friendly casualties. Every mission objective achieved ahead of schedule. A Draknor officer stood up. His name was Morthak, and he was 156 years old. Records mean nothing. War requires wisdom that only comes with age. Taemin spoke for the first time. His voice was calm and quiet. Permission to address the council, sir? Vecthar studied him. Granted, war requires many things. Wisdom is one of them. But speed matters too. So does the ability to adapt when plans fail. My team moves fast because we know we don't have centuries to fight. We learn from each mission because we might not survive to the next one. That makes us careful. That makes us efficient, he paused. And that's why we win. The room was silent. Finally, Vecthar spoke. You have 48 hours, Lieutenant. Scout Leader Theris will observe your operation. He looked at Taemin with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. Do not make me regret this. The ice moon of Kelthera 9 was a nightmare world. Temperatures dropped to 200 degrees below zero. Winds moved at 300 kilometers per hour. The atmosphere would freeze human lungs in seconds without protection. Taemin's team dropped through the storm in a small stealth craft. Besides him, there were 5 others. Sergeant Dayun Choi handled explosives and engineering. Corporal Hyun-Woo Lee was their sniper. 3 other specialists completed the team. They had trained together for 2 years. They knew each other's moves without speaking. Scout Leader Theris watched from orbit. The insectoid alien monitored their progress with all her sensors. She had seen many coalition operations. They usually took hours just to establish a safe landing zone. The human team landed in 37 minutes. They moved through the ice storm like ghosts. Their suits were designed for extreme environments, but it was more than equipment. It was the way they moved. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Each person knew exactly what to do. First patrol ahead, Hyun-Woo said quietly. 6 hostiles. Standard formation. Dayun, can you loop their communications? Taemin asked. Give me 20 seconds. Taemin counted down in his head. At exactly 20 seconds, Dayun said. Done, they can't call for help. Move in. Non-lethal if possible. What happened next took 15 seconds. The human team hit the patrol like a wave. The Separatists never had time to raise their weapons. When it was over, all 6 enemies were unconscious and secured. Not one shot had been fired. In orbit, Theris replayed the footage 3 times. She could barely follow what had happened. The humans moved so fast. Their coordination was perfect. How did they do it without a hive mind? The team reached the facility's outer wall. It was solid metal 3 meters thick, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Da-Yun pulled out her tools. Coalition design, Mark 7 security. I know this system. Her fingers moved across her equipment. The aliens who built this are very thorough. Very careful, very predictable. How long? Taemin asked. 4 minutes. In a coalition military academy, soldiers learned that breaking Mark 7 security took trained engineers at least 6 hours. Da-Yun opened it in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. They moved inside. The facility was a maze of corridors and security checkpoints. The separatists had over 200 soldiers inside. Taemin had 6 people. We don't fight all of them, he told his team. We move past their defenses. We go straight to the command center. We take their leader. Without leadership, they'll surrender. It was a plan that violated every rule of coalition military doctrine. You were supposed to secure each area before moving forward. You were supposed to establish fallback positions. You were supposed to move slowly and carefully. Humans didn't do any of that. They went through the facility like a knife through water. When they encountered resistance, they moved around it. When they couldn't go around, they went through so fast the enemy didn't have time to react. When they had to fight, it was over before it started. Theris watched in amazement. This was nothing like coalition tactics. It was chaos. It was reckless. It was brilliant. Deep in the facility's heart, Taemin found the command center. The separatist leader was there, a scarred Draknor veteran named Korthak. He was surrounded by 20 guards. He was heavily armed. He had prepared for a siege, not an infiltration. You're Korthak, Taemin said calmly. You have one chance to surrender. Take it, Korthak laughed. You're a child. I've been fighting wars since before your species reached space. I have 20 warriors. You have what? 5, 6? 5, Taemin confirmed. And about 30 seconds before those 20 warriors wake up from the sedative gas, Sergeant Choi just released into this room's ventilation. You can fight me in those 30 seconds or you can surrender. Choose. Korthak reached for his weapon. He was fast. Decades of combat had made him very fast. Taemin was faster. 3 moves. The first disarmed Korthak. The second put him on the ground. The third locked him in a hold he couldn't escape. It took 4 seconds. Gas masks on, Taemin said to his team. They sealed their helmets. The guards started falling. 28 seconds after Taemin entered the room, every enemy was unconscious. Facility secured, Taemin reported. All hostiles neutralized. Technology recovered. 0 friendly casualties. Time elapsed 23 hours, 14 minutes. On Bastion 7, the command center was silent. High Commander Vekthar stared at the reports. Scout leader Theris had sent detailed footage of everything. Every impossible thing the humans had done. War Duke Morthak stood beside him. This changes everything, the Draknor said quietly. Yes, Vekthar agreed. He looked at the screen showing Taemin's face. So young, so terrifyingly effective. Perhaps we have been fighting wars the wrong way for 3,000 years. In the transport heading back to Bastion 7, Taemin sat with his team. Da-Yun was checking her equipment. Hyun-Woo was cleaning his rifle. The others were resting. Good work, Taemin said quietly. Just another day, Da-Un replied with a small smile. But they all knew it wasn't just another day. Something had changed. The coalition had seen what humans could do in combat. Some would be impressed. Some would be threatened. Some would be afraid. Taemin stared out the window at the stars. He was 19 years old. He had just completed a mission that coalition commanders said was impossible. And somehow he knew this was only the beginning. The briefing room would talk about him now. The old commanders with their centuries of experience. They would wonder how a human child became a warrior that made experienced soldiers look slow and unprepared. He didn't have centuries of experience. He had urgency. He had the knowledge that every moment mattered because humans didn't live forever. That made him careful. That made him fast. That made him dangerous. In the coalition military, they were starting to learn a new truth. Age brought wisdom, yes, but youth brought something else. Something the old commanders had forgotten or never known. Youth brought fire, and fire, properly directed, could change everything.